To God be the glory.
Welcome back, students, to class number 4. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the origin of the Hebrew alphabet, and we'll also want to begin practicing writing the actual Hebrew letters. Now, I know that we've been talking about the Hebrew letters and basically trying to identify what those letters looked like when you read it in the printed text. But now what we're going to try to focus on, of course, you're going to be doing a lot of writing yourself and going to need to learn to write the Hebrew letters yourself, and so that's basically what we're going to be focusing on. Before we do that, though, I want to talk a little bit about how we got to the Hebrew letters and the script as we know it today. In ancient days, Hebrew was written in common Semitic alphabet used alike by the Moabites and the Hebrews and the Armenians and the Phoenicians. It's known as the Phoenician, Canaanite, or Paleo-Hebrew script. If you look in your textbooks for a chart on the bottom of page 24, table number 3, you'll see an example of what we're talking about. Inscriptions that have been discovered in the Sinai Peninsula on potsherds, which are, you'll recall, broken pieces of pottery. And archaeologists find more of these than they do anything else, and they've been very helpful to the study of languages, especially in the study of Hebrew. But we find these potsherds, or these broken pieces of pottery, and they have writing on them. And inscriptions that have been discovered on these potsherds and other objects indicate that writing, of course, has been going on for a long time, and having a certain alphabetic writing was in circulation as early as, or maybe even earlier, as future discoveries may reveal. But we know at least as early as the 6th century BC. The writing is generally believed to be the beginning of the Canaanite writing system. And the Old Hebrew alphabet was probably derived from this Canaanite or the Phoenician script. But as with a lot of other things, with time there was a little bit of a change and a variation in the way certain letters would be written, and of course Hebrew was the same way. In 1929 we had a large number of cuneiform inscriptions that dated from the 15th century BC and were written in an alphabetic script. And they were discovered in the northern Syrian town of Ugarit, today known as Ras Shamra. Talked a little bit about that in lesson number 2. The language of these inscriptions is now called Ugarit. It is clear, or Ugaritic. It is clear from some of these tablets that the present order of the Hebrew alphabet was known at Ugarit as early as the 15th century BC. So we understand our understanding of the Hebrew alphabet is actually much older than we had thought previously. Perhaps it's the oldest known alphabet in recorded history, that is, that which was found at Ugarit. The earliest examples of Hebrew occur, for instance, on the famous Moabite stone of King Mesha in the 9th century BC. And on the inscription discovered at the Pool of Siloam, which dates about the 8th century BC, and on the Lachish inscriptions. All of these names are mentioned in the Bible and help us know that these things are tied into things that Bible writers and those involved in Bible events knew about. The transition from the Phoenician script to the square script was first effected in the Aramaic language and then in Hebrew. So Hebrew was that which picked up the square script a little bit later, about the 5th and 4th centuries BC. And this change occurred, no doubt, because of the growing influence of the Aramaic language immediately before the Christian era. All right, this script was eventually became known as the Aramaic, or the Asherai, square or square script. Asherai is a Hebrew name for Assyrian. And that's what, when we're talking about Asherai, that's what we're talking about, just what the Hebrews called the Assyrians. From this, the square script we use today in print was developed, and that's where this comes from. Jewish tradition ascribes this change to the biblical character of Ezra, who led back the return of exiles in the Old Testament. But others view it a little bit differently and say that it was a scientific progress or process that took place over hundreds of years. For a time, both forms were used, the old form and then the new form that was influenced by the Aramaic script. And this is evidenced not only by the Maccabean coins of the 2nd century BC, but also the Dead Sea Scrolls, believed to be of the 2nd and 1st century BC. And we find examples of both writing, and so we know that some people used one particular form and others, and probably those that did a lot of writing were very capable of writing in either one of the scripts. Later, the ancient form was completely abandoned, and the new script was that which was used by nearly everyone. But it's been preserved until the present day by the Samaritans in Palestine. Now, the Greek alphabet, believe it or not, has some similarities to the Hebrew, and some of the characters from the Greek alphabet did get their character or their formation from the Hebrew. So it's generally agreed that the Greeks adopted, with some modifications and additions, this old Phoenician alphabet along with its Semitic names and order of the letters of the Phoenician traders who frequented their isles from about the 9th century BC. And so as a result of these traders coming through, they learned about some of their writing and the way that some of their letters were written. It's obvious that the Greek alpha, beta, gamma, delta are Semitic, and they correspond to the Hebrew aleph, bet, gimel, daleth, and so the variation or the similarities are fairly clear. Now, if you look on Table 4 on page 25, you can see the printed way that a number of these things were written, including the simplified square writing, which is that which we are looking at most. All right, then skipping over some of the other material that we have there and going to page 27 in the textbook, we have some study hints I want to talk a little bit about before we go into the exercises. First, it is important to know something about the development of the Hebrew script. This is, and of course what we've just done, is a brief survey. Try to read the article under alphabet in a reference book and an encyclopedia. If you have an International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, that would be something that you could look up, the word Mesha and Lachish and Siloam, and you can learn a little bit more about these places. Also, I want you to notice that the Hebrew script that we use today is not, strictly speaking, a Hebrew alphabet. It's an Aramaic script, first adopted in Aramaic and subsequently in Hebrew, about the 3rd or 2nd century BC. And this is what is known and what we've been calling the square script. Now, in writing your assignment for this lesson and future lessons, we're going to be using and learning the simplified square Hebrew script. And the other types of writing are something that we're not going to concern ourselves with. All right? In the exercises, we have exercise A that says, transcribe the following into Hebrew or English letters. Now, we'll go over to the chalkboard here and do some of these things together. Now, that first section that has these letters to transcribe to English letters, that's the part we'll skip over because we've already had some practice. You need to do that on your own, though. Continue to do all of the exercises and all the things that are required. But the time that we'll spend together in this particular lesson will deal with learning how to write these Hebrew letters the correct way. All right, so let's begin with the alphabet and start right off with the Hebrew letter Aleph. All right, when you write Aleph, you need to start and make it kind of like a funny, squirrely looking X. That's the way that you make the Hebrew Aleph. All right, you start on the top left and just kind of make a fancy X like that. All right, with me and with the piece of paper in front of you, let's make a whole row of Alephs saying the letter or saying the name of the letter together. All right? Aleph. 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 All right, continue to do that as you go across the rest of the page. Maybe even pause the tape for just a moment and do that again with another line. But write the letter and then pronounce it as you are writing the letter, Aleph, so that when you see these you'll be able to just to call them by name, and of course pronouncing it correctly, and also learning how to write it correctly. All right, let's go to the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and that's bet. All right, bet, again, is written starting from the top right, or excuse me, top left. You make a square, you come down, again, you put out a little bitty tail, and then you come in like that. All right, that's bet. So we write it like that, bet, bet. Little bitty flag there on top, little bitty kind of curve up there at the top, bet, bet. Of course, we're not worried about the dagesh right now. Bet, bet. All right, that's the second Hebrew letter. All right, now understand that it's vet without the dagesh, and it'd be bet with the dagesh, and that's what basically we're pronouncing it. We will continue to call this letter bet, even though it may not have a dagesh. All right, the third letter, learn how to write these letters correctly, is the gimel. Now the gimel is, you got a little flag, you bring it straight down to the line that's on the page, if you have lines on your pages, and then you put out a little leg like that. Gimel. All right? Let's write this together. Gimel. Pronounce it. Gimel. 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 All right, that's the way you make the Hebrew letter Gimel. All right, the next is Dalet, and the easiest way to do the Dalet is just make a square like that, just almost a half of a box. Some people like to put a little flag on that, and that's fine. I probably do it sometimes, but make sure that you have a definite square right here is what's really key. Got to make sure that's square, because it's going to look an awful lot like the Hebrew letter resh. All right? Dalet. Square that off. Dalet. Make sure it's square. Dalet. Also, make sure as you're writing the Dalet that you don't go beyond the line. Don't go beyond the line, because if you do, it's going to look like the ending kaf. Dalet. 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 And also, make sure that you have extended the line on top here as well. Because if you didn't, like let's say you did that right there, that looks an awful lot like a vav. All right, so you've got to make sure you have it like that. All right, that's the fourth Hebrew letter, Dalet. Again, you may need to pause the tape, practice writing and pronouncing these letters. All right, the next letter is what's called Hey. All right, you've already learned that. That's what that looks like. Now, remember that the Hey does not connect. It does not connect. Make absolutely sure you do not let this line connect with the top. Okay, square that off. Hey, so we're making it exactly like we made the Dalet, only we're adding an additional line. Hey. 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 All right. That's the way that we write the fifth letter. All right. We'll erase those and continue on with the next set of letters. The sixth letter is the Vav. The Vav is just a little curvature and a straight line. Let's say this was the line on our page. All right, make sure that we keep the Vav above the line. Vav. 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 That's probably a little bit too much here. Vav. 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 Make sure you're pronouncing it out loud. Hear yourself say these words. Vav. 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 All right. The next Hebrew letter, very, very similar to the Vav, and this is one when we write it out, we try to make a definite distinction, and it's the Hebrew Zion. Zion. Now you make it like a T, only the top of the T is all messed up. Curve it on down, going high to low, and then just a straight line in the middle. Make sure that these does not extend beyond the line of the page. Zion. Zion. Curve that line down. Zion. 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 Zion, like that. Zion. Okay, that's the way that you make the Zion. All right, the next letter, the eighth one, is the Heth, or the Het. This is one that, like the Hey, only this is completely squared off right here, and that's the area of importance right there. Make absolutely sure that you square that letter off. Het. 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 Not a difficult letter to write. It's just important that you make sure that you get it cornered off there in the top left, right up there. Het. Het. All right. This is a letter that's pronounced like that, and that's the letter. All right. The next letter is Tet. Now, if you're used to making the little heart, that is very similar to the way that you'll write the Hebrew Tet. Just go ahead and although a heart, you'd normally put a point on it, kind of like that, and that's not. We're going to curve it around and make it round on the bottom, but that's virtually what we're going to do, like that. Tet. 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 All right, that's the Hebrew letter Tet. All right, the next one, we'll erase these. Is the Hebrew Yod. All right, let's pretend this is our line, and let's say this is the line right above that. And normally the Hebrew letter would take up the whole space. All right, if it took up the whole space, like let's say we had a Hey, the Hey would go like that, and then the Yod in proportion to that, and that's our next letter, Yod, goes about like that. All right, notice the difference. It's at the top, and it's about half the size of the other letter. So it is by far the smallest Hebrew letter, and it's pronounced Yod. 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 Be careful not to extend it down too far. Yod. 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 Sounds like Rocky. Yod Adrian. Yod. 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 Okay, that's the way that we make the Hebrew Yod. All right, the next one is Kaf. This is just a backward C. That's all that is. Just a backward C. Kaf. 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 Now, when you're making this letter, make absolutely sure that you've got it curved, because the base, the bet, looks like that. And if you get sloppy with your bet, and you're kind of making your bet like that, notice how that looks an awful lot like the cough. So the cough is a C, it's a circle like that. And make sure that when you're writing these, you write it where it's clear what it is that you're writing. All right, the next letter, let's go ahead and draw our line here so we see what we're doing, is the Hebrew lamed. Lamed. Say that with me. Lamed. All right? This is like a lightning bolt. You coming down, start at the top, you come down slightly going to the left, then you go straight out, and then you bolt down to the bottom, not going beyond the line. All right? Lamed. 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 All right. Practice as you work on your vocabulary to, just like you learned when you were a kid, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, so on. Make sure that you're able to speak the Hebrew alphabet, just Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daleth, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Heth, Teth, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, and so on. Learn the alphabet well enough where you can do that and you know where the letters go in the alphabet. All right, so that's the Lamed. The next letter is the Mem. Now the Mem, the way that you would write that, perhaps you remember if you learned to write English in script, that you used to make a G sort of like that. That's the way that you make the Hebrew Mem, like that G. Mem. 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 All right. That's the Hebrew Mem. Okay. Let's erase those. Go to the next letter in our alphabet, and that's the Hebrew Nun. We'll draw our line up here. Nun is a little bitty flag at the top. You come straight down, and then you go out, extending it a ways out there. All right, now when you make this particular letter, make absolutely sure that you have a little bitty flag up there. If you get kind of careless and you put too much on it, it'll look like either a base or a cough. All right, so sometimes you get where you don't even put anything up there at all. You just kind of go straight down and you go straight out like that. And it's a little fancier to put a little flag up there on top, but nevertheless, make absolutely sure that you come straight down, and then also make sure that you extend out a ways, because if you don't, it'll look an awful lot like the Vav, which looks like that, you'll recall. All right, so we do almost the same thing as a Vav, only we extend it out, and that's Nun. All right, let's say it together. Nun. 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 Noon. 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 All right, that's the Hebrew noon. Next is what's called the Samic. The Samic, you begin at the top, you make a circle, only you don't meet the circle at the top. Leave a little flag or a little something sticking out there at the top. Samic. Make the circle, bring it around. Samic. 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 Samik, 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 Samik. All right. Next is the ayin. The ayin, you make the square just like that, only you just draw a little line right there in the middle. All right, that's all you do. Just kind of make it like an arrow pointing down like that. Okay, square it off, draw the line in the middle. Ayin. Square it off. Ayin. 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 Actually, I should be making these bigger here. Ayin. Should cover up, pretty much take up the whole space. Ayin. 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 All right, that's the Hebrew ayin. The next letter is the pei or the fei. Remember that with the dagesh in it, it's P, and without the dagesh in it, then it's an F. All right, we make this starting our pencil in the middle, then bringing it up and over and past the lower line, then back down and in. All right, so it's got three corners like a box, only you cut the box off as you were finishing it off and have a little line go in. So if you had a little trap door right there and it dropped down, you'd have your nice little box. So just bring the pencil around like that to make pei. Pei. Kind of looks like a 9, doesn't it? Only it's got a little thing on the bottom. Pei. 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 All right, once again, you need to be taking as much time as you need to write these letters out correctly and also pronouncing them as you write them down. The 18th letter is the sadi, pronounced sadi. All right, the sadi, you bring it a slash all the way across from top to bottom, and then you bring it over, and then you put a little connection on top. So it looks like a backward Y with a tail that runs off from right to left. All right? Sadi. 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 All right, that's the 18th letter, the sadi. Let's go on to number 19, and this is the kof. Kof, not kaf. Remember, that's the letter that looks like a backward C. This is kof, and on the kof, you have a line that slightly goes beyond the line on the page, and then you just kind of wrap it off like a P. That's kof. 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 All right, then the next letter is the Hebrew letter resh. Now be very careful that you have a curvature, a definite distinct curvature on your resh. Remember that if you square it off like that, then you're going to end up making a daleth on it, and that's not what we want to do. So we've got to make sure that this is curved up here, otherwise it's going to look like that daleth. Resh. Resh. Curve that around. Resh. 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 Curve it around. Resh. Go back over and look at what you've written on your page. Make absolutely sure that yours are curved, otherwise it's not going to be right and you'll be confused on what it is that you're writing. The 21st letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the Shin. We just make this like a W. With the line down the middle, just make a U, and then just go ahead and bring that line right down the middle, just like that. Shin. 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 Now, if we put the dot here, then it'd be sin. Sin, or sin, some people say, but shin would be what we'd have over here. Shin, shin, and that's what we've been pronouncing, but it'd be just S-I-N instead of S-H, depending on where we have the dot. And then finally, the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the Hebrew Tav. All right, you bring this from bottom right and down, and then flag it out like that. Up and around, curve it, point it out, Tav. Tav. Definite T sound with the Tav. T. Tav. 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 All right, that is all 22 letters. Gives you a good idea of some of the way that these things ought to be written. Now, some of the notes that we have on the bottom of page 14 in the lesson book, we know that when we look at these letters of the alphabet, we've got to be very careful that we do make the letters in the correct way. Otherwise, when we are writing these things ourselves, we're going to be messing up, and we're not going to be able to tell what it is that we've just written down, whether it's a Dalet or whether it's a Resh, or exactly what it is. All right? Now I want to go back to the chalkboard one more time and let us together do one of the exercises that is there in the book. If you notice, it says on page 28, there in lesson 4, it says, write the following in simplified square script. So what we'll do is I'll write that, and then you write it, and see if yours looks anything like mine here. See if we've learned how to write these things correctly. All right, so the first 3 letters we have is Base, Kof, Resh. All right, so we'll do Base, Kof, Resh. And then the next one we have, put my little comma there, is Ayin, Resh, Bet. The third one, Bet, Tet, Heth. Make sure I connect it up at the top. The next one is Aleph with my ending Pei. Bring that down. Remember, the ending Pei extends right on down. And then the last one, we have a Shin. Make that W looking. Noon. Hey. So I don't bring that all the way up to the top on my hey. All right, then the line right underneath that, let's go through that and practice it together. We have a Shin, a Lamed, make that lamed, a vav, and then an ending mem. So that word looks kind of familiar. That's the word shalom, if you recognize that. Shalom. All right, then we'll go to the next word. We have a mem, a lamed, and an ending kaf. So bring that kaf down past the line. All right, the next word we have an ayin and an ending sadi. So make sure you make that backward Y, go ahead and extend it all the way. Remember, normally we would have written a sadi like that and go ahead and broken it off and brought it across. But this time we're bringing it all the way down. That's the word for tree, by the way. Next word we have a gimel, a dalet, a vav, and a lamed. All right. Once again, practice writing these and see if you're writing it like you see on the board. Then we have a zayin, an aleph, and a tav. See if you have that written down like you see it written on the board. All right, copy these exercises, review the tape if necessary. Now I want to take just a moment here and review the letters that we need that have a special ending form. And once again, practice on these letters that have the special ending form. They're given to you on page 15. But let's practice writing the ending form for the kaf. This would be like a huge 7 dropping down below the line. Kaf, 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 kaf. All right, the next one, mem. Just make that square. Mem, 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 mem. All right, the next one is noon. A little bitty flag, bring it all the way down. Noon, 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 noon. All right? And then the last two is the pay. Bring that down, pay, 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 pay. Don't break it off like we would normally, but when it ends a word, bring it all the way down. And then finally, sadi, 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 sadi. All right, so here we have 5 letters that take a special ending form. All right, that's the way that we write our Hebrew alphabet, and you need to practice on that, work on that so that you're able to write these letters so that in the future lessons when it requires us to do that, you'll be able to get started right away and do the things that are necessary.